Some coaches are much better at telling their players what to do than they are at teaching their players how to do it. Coaches are especially good at telling their players to relax just before an at-bat or a free throw. But how many coaches have you had who have actually taught you how to relax? It is, after all, possible to learn to relax, even without vacationing in Washington or Colorado. And there are several different techniques that you can try, each of which use a different starting point to arrive at the same blissful destination. The first route involves breathing. Our amazing bodies are set up so that some actions like digestion occur automatically. Some actions like kicking a ball need to be consciously controlled. And some actions like breathing happen automatically but can be controlled if for some reason we decide to take control. Fortunately, your body keeps breathing even when you aren't consciously controlling your breathing or putting any effort into breathing. And our bodies make adjustments as necessary. When running, we need more oxygen, so our breathing deepens and accelerates to get us the extra oxygen we need. And when we get nervous, our breathing changes, and instead of breathing from the diaphragm, we'll sometimes tighten up and breathe from the chest, neck, or shoulders. And these short, shallow breaths from the chest, neck, and shoulders can actually make us feel more anxious. So in order to relax, you need to override the autopilot temporarily and take control of the steering column, so to speak, by taking control of your breathing. To understand the difference between breathing from your chest and breathing from your diaphragm, put one hand on your chest and one hand on your upper abdominals just below your rib cage. Then breathe in through your nose and breathe out through your lips, paying attention to which hand is moving as you breathe. If you're breathing correctly, the hand placed below the rib cage and over your diaphragm will be moving out as you inhale and in as you exhale. When people are intentional about it, diaphragmatic breathing can help promote relaxation and alleviate anxiety by disrupting the fight or flight response. Diaphragmatic breathing can also help people manage pain. And controlled breathing, by the way, is central to the Lamaze method of painless childbirth. Easy for Ferdinand Lamaze, the man who developed the Lamaze method, to say, but apparently the methods are quite helpful in reducing pain during childbirth. In addition to being helpful in the delivery room, the application of diaphragmatic breathing to sports are obvious. In pressure situations, say before shooting a free throw or kicking a penalty kick or kicking a field goal, an athlete might take a few deep breaths from the diaphragm to deal with the nerves. And some athletes might use this technique before a competition to regulate their arousal or get themselves focused. The second route to relaxation involves muscle tension. Progressive muscle relaxation, which was developed by Jacobson in 1962, involves flexing and then relaxing muscles in each of the muscle groups in your body. Think of progressive muscle relaxation as muscle-to-mind relaxation. By tensing and relaxing each muscle group, an athlete can develop better kinesthetic awareness, learning what it feels like to be tense and what it feels like to be relaxed, so that when they start to feel tense before a free throw or penalty kick, that person can override the autopilot and take control of their muscle tension. And it's actually pretty simple. You might tense up your fists and hold that for 5 or 10 seconds and very gradually relax. And then tense up your arms for 5 or 10 seconds and very gradually relax, really paying attention to what it feels like to be tense and what it feels like to be relaxed. And then going up through the shoulders and the neck and down through the torso and the legs and the feet and the toes, tensing up and then relaxing each muscle group by group. The third route to relaxation, the autogenic approach, is the opposite of progressive muscle relaxation. Instead of muscle to mind, autogenic relaxation is mind to muscle. Autogenic relaxation, which was developed by Schultz and Luth in 1969, uses the power of suggestion to convince your body to relax by inducing feelings of heaviness and warmth. To be effective, the relaxation script is essentially one really long run-on sentence. There are no periods, just lots of commas and conjunctions. By using copious quantities of conjunctions to string together a series of suggestions, the working memory of the athlete is maxed out. And by making the suggestions somewhat vague and ambiguous, the mind is allowed to wander. And that is why autogenic relaxation is relaxing. So there you have it, 3 different routes to relaxation. Learning to relax without the help of substances can be an important life skill, because chronic stress isn't good for our physical or mental health. And for athletes, chronic stress can contribute to worse performance and increased risk of injuries, because we tend to be more distractible and more tense when we experience stress. If your muscles feel more like dry spaghetti than cooked spaghetti when you're competing, something is wrong. When athletes make a few mistakes during a competition, they tend to get frustrated. And if mistakes are severe enough or especially embarrassing, or if they just don't have a very high frustration tolerance, frustration can turn to preoccupation. And when an athlete is preoccupied, they tend to ruminate on past mistakes and worry about the consequences of those mistakes, rather than focus on the present. And when the mind races through an erratic thought process full of regret and worry, muscles tend to tense up. When coaches sense that something is wrong, they sometimes tell the athlete or yell at the athlete to just relax. But telling an athlete to just relax without having taught them how to relax can be counterproductive. Because as the player enters the game, and they're already nervous, being told to do something that they don't know how to do can be even more distressing. When an athlete's attention is divided between the past, present, and future, and their muscles tense up and confidence plummets, performance tends to decline. And once an athlete is already preoccupied, they're at risk of dialing out if additional mistakes are made. And when an athlete dials out, they essentially give up, whether by asking for a substitute or just going through the motions until the clock runs out, because they've lost hope in the possibility of reversing a bad performance. So the act of dialing out is actually a stress management technique, a maladaptive technique, but a technique nonetheless. Obviously, it's not a good thing if athletes get to the point where they're tempted to give up. So for the sake of a team's performance, a coach needs to know her players well enough to see in their eyes, their facial expressions, and their posture when their players are frustrated, preoccupied, and perhaps dialed out. And realizing that competition can be stressful, coaches should anticipate the need to develop stress management skills in their players and equip them with techniques to use in pressure situations. In addition to the 3 techniques that I described, which treat stress symptoms, another approach would be to look a little deeper into the reasons why an athlete might be experiencing such intense stress. For lack of a better term, call it an existential approach. Sometimes the deeper problem might involve a debilitating fear of failure, or a maladaptive need for approval. A high school friend of mine used to have this written above her mirror in her bathroom. You wouldn't worry so much about what people thought of you if you realized how seldom they actually did. Sometimes the problem might be a matter of perspective. When something becomes our life and our identity gets wrapped up in our performance, pressure tends to build beyond the point where it's facilitative. And that may be why athletes who tend to perform best at the Olympic Games are people who have lives outside of their sport. Personal lives, maybe a job, or some other less fickle source of meaning and identity than sport performance. So over the long term, dealing with the source of the stress, perhaps by examining the meaning they ascribe to sport and what role being an athlete plays in their identity, might be the best strategy for athletes who experience the sort of debilitating stress that can lead to choking under pressure. But each of the routes to relaxation that I described can be useful in the short term by providing a strategy that an athlete can use to relax once they have learned to breathe, flex and relax, or use the power of suggestion to induce feelings of heaviness and warmth. But each approach can be helpful in the longer term by helping an athlete to develop a greater awareness of their tension and relaxation. Because once we develop awareness, we have greater control. So even without progressing through a muscle relaxation or autogenic script, an athlete can learn to relax on cue. Some athletes or coaches might want to use a relaxation technique to prepare for a training session or competition. Others might want to use a relaxation technique during a competition when there's breaks in the action, especially if they precede an important event like a putt, a free throw, or a penalty kick. And others might want to use relaxation techniques to create a break state between two activities. Say, for example, you're a student athlete. In addition to sleeping and eating, your day might consist of attending class, participating in a training session, and studying. But moving from one activity to another can be challenging because as you try to read your textbook, your eyes are scanning over the words, but your mind is still focused on something that went particularly well or particularly not so well during a training session. But if you spend a few minutes using one of the relaxation techniques, it can be much easier to be where you are after transitioning between activities. Coaching can be a stressful job, so coaches might also use the relaxation techniques to help themselves relax before, during, and after training sessions and competitions, and when transitioning between the various tasks that coaches engage in, teaching, training, managing, mentor, and recruiting, and when making the transition between their work life and their home life. With a little bit of practice, these strategies are simple enough for a coach to learn, to use themselves, and to teach to their players. And then they can better deal with the stresses of coaching, and they can make the transition from being one of the many coaches who know how to tell their players to relax to being among the few who know how to teach their players how to relax.